I did predict that California U.S. Senator Feinstein would push for crazier and ever crazier gun control laws, but I admit that's a bit like predicting my vehicle will need fuel to run, or that it will rain in London, or that I will overpay for that coffee at Starbucks. What's worse is that Feinstein herself is a concealed carry permit holder. There is proof that she was, but she's been silent on the matter of late. And a concealed carry permit is hardly an item you don't want to renew when you have one. I like to occasionally remind myself of the leftists' hypocritical actions. I watch Harry Reid, Rahm Emanuel, Barbara Boxer, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Dianne Feinstein on a regular basis, but I digress. In actuality, my point of this post is to talk with all gun owners about Dianne Feinstein's quote-unquote gun control issues. And I'm sure I'm not going to be persuading any left-leaning or fully entrenched progressives into voting Republican or conservative to keep their guns safe, though I do also want to talk to the liberal and progressive gun owners. See, because I personally believe, though most of my contemporaries in the conservative political spectrum do not, that there are many left-leaners who are patriots, lovers of freedom, and realists, rather than the typical party line, talking point wielding leftists we see on the news shows during prime time. The most important thing to remember is that an erosion of our Second Amendment freedoms can only be detrimental to the protection of our First Amendment freedoms. And once we've started down the slippery slope towards tyranny, the real fireworks will begin. It will hardly be a time for I told you so's. It will be a time for survival and perhaps even a revolution. Now, NSA and others, don't read too far into this. I'm not the head of a militia, not even a member of one. I'd rather move than try and fight against the government. But I am perhaps in the minority now, after years and years of surrendering our freedoms wholesale to the government in exchange for the illusion of safety. Back to Dianne Feinstein. On her webpage, she outlined the work she's been doing. But I refuse to believe that this bill had anything to do with the Sandy Hook elementary shooting. In fact, there's enough floating around to make it seem quite awkward to have happened right when it did. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists who are actually starting to make some sense with their indictments of the Sandy Hook incident. First and foremost, this isn't a callous politicization of that event. It seems relatively clear that children and adults died at the hands of a crazy person wielding a couple of pistols. Yes, they did find the rifle in the trunk of the car. That event is sad, horrific, disturbing. It is certainly enough to give a person pause. It's definitely enough to look at what we've been doing with our mental health programs in the United States over the past 4 decades. What Sandy Hook isn't is the catalyst for gun control measures above and beyond what we already have. Sandy Hook did not inspire Feinstein to write this proposed legislation. If anything, Sandy Hook was a stark reminder that we have de-evolved as a nation, and it gave us a reason to consider working together again. Sandy Hook, perhaps, is the reason why you're hearing this audio. It has made many of us stop, take a good look around us, and wonder if we're doing enough. But when it comes to gun control laws, don't you think we've already done enough? I mean, here are some interesting facts for you. While Feinstein has purported that the 1994 assault weapons ban reduced crime, specifically, she says, a 6.7% decrease in murders, the actual facts of the study are this. The DOJ concluded in its post-assault weapon ban report that they could perhaps conclude that the ban contributed to a decrease of murders to the tune of 6.7%, but that it had insufficient data at the time to fairly make a call. They refused to rule out the assault weapon ban from having some effect, but noted that significant regional and state initiatives also took place in the same time frame, and historically would have had a bigger positive impact on murder rates. Additionally, it escaped Miss Feinstein's radar that the period beginning on September 13th, 1994, and through to the current date, the number of assault weapons, quote, on our streets, end quote, as it were, has increased dramatically. Forget that term, on our streets, is a term used by anti-gunners to talk about total purchases, not actually the ones which find themselves on the actual street being used by criminals in actual crimes. In tandem, the BATFE estimates 2.5 million more, quote, assault type, end quote, weapons exist in the period described above. Moving hand in hand with this prominent increase in these horrible firearms, we are enjoying the lowest murder rate in 48 years. The murder rate in this time frame has fallen 48%, while these guns have gained prominence, quote, in our streets. It's also important to note that Ms. Feinstein uses the tracing of firearms as an indication of the effectiveness of the gun ban from 1994, but fails to point out that traces are arbitrary in many cases and often neither correlate to criminal activity nor do they indicate crime or lack of it. The decrease in tracking, active present tense, or tracing, active after the fact, of a firearm by law enforcement agencies does not indicate that there are fewer crimes involving so-called assault weapons. In fact, the decrease in traces does imply a lack of desire by law enforcement agencies to do the traces. Dianne Feinstein has boned up on her nomenclature and has found some friends who know a thing or two about terminology, but it hasn't improved her ability to write meaningful legislation. In the next video from nightgunsmith.com, I'll detail the reasons why this newer quote-unquote improved version of the 1994 Clinton-era assault weapon ban has done nothing to help decrease crime, and in fact may not do anything to curb the incidence of large-scale shootings, like the one which took place in Connecticut. Suffice it to say, the best thing to do is to become educated. Be from the left, the center, or the right. Information, sound reasoning, and an ability to remove the emotion of a shocking crime from the equation is the only way we can enact meaningful and helpful changes, which even this guy on the far right gun freedom side can admit is necessary. It should go without saying, though, that I don't believe we need new legislation on guns, but rather new ways to combat crime. Perhaps this is the dawning of a new age of realist thinking, which still advocates for the freedoms hard fought and won by our predecessors when the Constitution was adopted as the governing document of this great country.